In the warm August sun of 2013, a young woman with paint-stained fingers and a free spirit that matched the endless Gulf horizon simply vanished. Tiffany Daniels was 25 years old, an artist and theater technician whose vibrant presence colored the world around her. She left behind a car parked near the water, a bicycle in the back, and a family shattered by questions without answers. As the tides rolled in and out along Pensacola's coastline, so too did the waves of hope and despair that washed over her loved one. For years, the silence stretched like an endless highway, with no signs of life, no digital footprint, no explanation. But after years of silence, a single clue would shatter everything. Before I tell you what happened, comment your country and time below. Pensacola, Florida in August 2013 was a tapestry of humidity and heat, with a Gulf air hung thick with the promise of afternoon thunderstorms and the scent of salt water mingled with jasmine. It was in this coastal paradise that Tiffany Daniels had built her life, a life as colorful and complex as the murals she painted on forgotten walls around town. At 25, Tiffany was at that beautiful precipice between youth and adulthood, still exploring who she might become, while already possessing a remarkable sense of self. Standing at 5 feet 7 inches with an artist's eyes that seemed to notice everything others missed, she moved through the world with a dancer's grace and an explorer's curiosity. Her naturally blonde hair was often streaked with colors that shifted with her mood. Vibrant blues when she felt inspired, soft pinks when she was contemplative. Tiffany worked as a theater technician at Pensacola State College, a role that suited her perfectly. She was a person who could transform a bare stage into a magical world, who understood how light and shadow could create emotion, who could build entire universes from wood and paint and fabric. Her colleagues remember her as someone who never saw limitations, only possibility. She could look at a pile of scrap materials and see a castle, recalled Marcus William, her supervisor at the theater department. That's just how her mind worked. She saw beauty where others saw nothing special. When she wasn't creating theatrical magic, Tiffany was painting large, abstract canvases filled with bold colors and flowing lines that seemed to capture the very essence of the Gulf Coast she loved so deeply. Her small rental house on East Blunt Street was both her sanctuary and her gallery, with canvases stacked against every wall and brushes soaking in mason jars filled with turpentine. But Tiffany wasn't someone who could be contained indoors for long. Her bicycle was her constant companion, and she was known to ride for hours along the coast, sometimes disappearing for entire days on what she called artistic expedition. She'd return with sun-kissed skin, salt-crusted hair, and a camera full of photographs that would inspire her next series of painting. Friends describe her as fiercely independent and beautifully impulsive, qualities that made her magnetic but also, in retrospect, potentially vulnerable. Tiffany lived life on her own terms, said her childhood friend, Sarah Jenkins. She didn't follow paths, she created them. Sometimes that worried us, her parents especially, but it was who she was. You can't put a wild bird in a cage. On the morning of August 12th, 2013, the heat was already oppressive by 9 a.m. when Tiffany arrived at work. The theater department was preparing for their fall production, and the air buzzed with creative energy. Tiffany moved through the space with her usual fluid grace, her mind already solving technical problems that wouldn't arise for weeks. Around noon, she told co-workers she was leaving early, mentioning vaguely that she had something to take care of. No one thought much of it. Tiffany often followed inspiration wherever it led, and her supervisors valued her results more than her adherence to a strict schedule. What happened next has been pieced together through security footage, witness statement, and the kind of painstaking reconstruction that becomes necessary when a life suddenly fractures into before and after. Tiffany arrived home around 12:30 p.m. A neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who lived across the street and watched the neighborhood from her porch rocker, remembered seeing Tiffany pull into her driveway. She didn't get out right away, Mrs. Henderson would later tell investigators. Just sat there for a minute or two, looking straight ahead, like she was thinking hard about something. Then she shook her head, like clearing it, and went inside. Inside her home, Tiffany changed clothes, leaving her work uniform on her bedroom floor. She grabbed a light jacket despite the heat, something that would later seem significant to investigators, and her wallet. Her purse remained on the kitchen counter. At approximately 1:15 p.m., Tiffany's gray Toyota 4Runner was captured on a traffic camera heading south on Barrancas Avenue, the main route toward Pensacola Beach. The camera showed her alone in the vehicle, appearing to drive normally. The last confirmed sighting came at 2:45 p.m., when a beach cleanup volunteer noticed her 4Runner parked in the Park West lot near the entrance to Fort Pickens. The volunteer, who spoke to investigators on condition of anonymity, remembered the vehicle because it stood out in the nearly empty parking lot. It was a hot Monday. Not many people at the beach on weekdays, the volunteer recalled. The car was parked facing the dunes, not the water like most beachgoers. I remember thinking that was odd when Tiffany didn't show up for a planned dinner with her parents that evening. Concern began to ripple through her inner circle. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. Text messages remained unread. By midnight, when she still hadn't returned home, her parents, Cindy and Rodney Daniels, filed a missing person report. The search began at dawn on August 13th. With volunteers and law enforcement combing the area around Fort Pickens. The discovery of Tiffany's 4Runner in the Park West lot brought both relief and renewed alarm. Inside the vehicle, investigators found her bicycle in the back, her phone charger plugged in but no phone, a half-empty water bottle, and a light jacket, the same one she'd been seen wearing on traffic cameras. Her wallet was on the passenger seat, containing her ID and credit card. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no obvious indications of foul play. What drew investigators' attention was the sand. Fine white sand covered the floor mats and was scattered on the seat. More significantly, tire impressions and sand patterns suggested the vehicle had been parked deliberately, not hastily abandoned. The driver's side door was unlocked, which friends said was uncharacteristic of the typically cautious Tiffany. As days turned into a week, the search expanded. Divers searched the waters around Fort Pickens. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the Gulf Coast. Volunteers posted thousands of flyers across 3 counties. But Tiffany Daniels had vanished like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Her image still visible, but her substance gone. The investigation revealed a puzzling absence of digital activity. Tiffany's bank accounts showed no transactions after August 12th. Her social media accounts went silent. Her phone never pinged again. It was as if she had stepped through a door to another dimension, leaving behind everything that made her recognizable in this one. Detectives interviewed her friends, co-workers, and recent acquaintances. They looked into her relationships, both past and present. They examined her computer and phone record, but nothing pointed to a clear direction. Theories emerged like ghosts in the fog. Had she met someone at the beach? Had she gone for a swim and been caught in a riptide? Had she arranged to leave voluntarily, starting a new life somewhere else? Or had something more sinister occurred in the remote stretch of coastline where her car was found? As September arrived and the tourist season ended, the official search efforts scaled back. The case was officially designated as cold by the Pensacola Police Department, though detectives continue to follow up on tips as they came in. For Tiffany's family, the transition from active search to cold case was devastating. The daily rhythm of hope, waking with purpose, joining search effort, comparing notes with other volunteers, gave way to the agonizing silence of uncertainty. Each morning brought the same question, where was Tiffany? And each evening ended with the same answer, no one knew. The disappearance of Tiffany Daniels had entered that most painful category of mystery, the kind that offered no closure, no finality, only the endless echo of questions without answers. The vibrant young artist who had painted her world with such bold strokes had become a ghost story whispered along the Gulf Coast, her name synonymous with one of Florida's most perplexing missing person cases. The first year after Tiffany's disappearance passed like a slow-motion nightmare for the Daniels family. Each holiday arrived with the cruel reminder of an empty place at the table. Each season change marked by what would have been another milestone in Tiffany's life. Thanksgiving 2013 was particularly brutal. Cindy Daniels spent the morning preparing Tiffany's favorite dishes: cornbread dressing with extra sage, sweet potato casserole with pecan topping, moving through the kitchen with the mechanical precision of someone trying to preserve normalcy in a world that had shattered. "We set her place," Cindy later recalled in an interview. "Her father couldn't look at it. I could not look at it. We ate in silence mostly, except when one of us would start to say something like, 'Tiffany always loved,' and then the words would just stop, hanging in the air like ghosts." Christmas brought its own particular anguish. The family had always celebrated with Tiffany's handmade ornament, quirky creations of papier-mâché, and found objects that she crafted since childhood. This year, Cindy carefully unwrapped each one, her fingers tracing the familiar shapes, as if trying to absorb some remaining essence of her daughter through the touch. Rodney Daniels, a man of few words even before the tragedy, retreated further into silence. His co-workers at the construction company where he worked as a foreman noticed a change in him, the way he'd stare into space during lunch breaks, the permanent furrow that had taken up residence between his eyes. Rodney was always a rock, said his brother, Mike Daniels. But after Tiffany disappeared, it was like that rock developed fissures you couldn't see, but you knew were there. He kept going to work, kept paying bills, kept functioning, but the light went out his eyes. The family established rituals to mark the passage of time without Tiffany. On the 12th of each month, they would visit the beach near where her car was found, bringing fresh flowers and lighting candles that the wind inevitably extinguished within minutes. On her birthday in March, they organized a community art show featuring Tiffany's work, turning grief into a celebration of her talent. These public displays of hope and remembrance contrasted sharply with the private anguish that consumed their daily lives. The question, what happened to Tiffany, became a constant undercurrent to every conversation, every decision, every quiet moment. As 2014 arrived, the initial media frenzy around the case had faded. Reporters who had once called daily now only reached out on anniversaries or when new development, usually none at all, occurred. The community's attention shifted to newer tragedy, fresher mystery. For the Daniels family, this fading of public interest was like experiencing the loss all over again. The search volunteers returned to their normal lives. The Facebook group Find Tiffany Daniels saw fewer and fewer posts. The ribbons tied to trees around town weathered and frayed. What remained was a peculiar isolation of those left behind by an unsolved disappearance. Unlike families who could move through the stages of grief toward acceptance, the Daniels family remained stuck in a perpetual limbo between hope and despair. Each time the phone rang unexpectedly, their hearts would leap. Each unfamiliar car passing by their house triggered a moment of anticipation. Each news report about unidentified remains brought a wave of nausea, followed by the complicated relief of not her. The psychological toll manifested differently for each family member. Cindy became obsessed with missing persons cases across the country, creating an elaborate spreadsheet of women who resembled Tiffany, tracking similarities and differences with desperate precision that bordered on compulsion. I think it was her way of staying connected to the search, explained Sarah Jenkins, Tiffany's childhood friend who remained close to the family. If she could help find someone else's daughter, maybe it would somehow bring Tiffany home, or at least keep her from being forgotten. Rodney, meanwhile, poured his energy into maintaining the physical world Tiffany had left behind. He kept the room exactly as she'd left it, her art supplies neatly arranged, her unfinished canvas on the easel. He tended to the garden she had planted, pruning the rose bushes she had lovingly cultivated, as if by maintaining these things he could somehow preserve the possibility of her return. The couple's marriage, once described by friends as rock solid, developed visible cracks. Grief, they discovered, was not a unifying force but an isolating one, with each partner experiencing it in ways the other couldn't fully comprehend. They sought counseling, joined support groups for families of missing persons, and found moments of connection in their shared loss, but the underlying tension remained. Meanwhile, the investigation into Tiffany's disappearance continued at a glacial pace. Detective Maria Rodriguez, who had been assigned a case from the beginning, remained committed to following every lead, no matter how faint. People think cold cases go into a file cabinet and never come out, Rodriguez explained in a 2015 interview. That's not how it works. They're always there in the back of your mind. You review them periodically. You keep them open. You wait for technology to catch up, for someone's conscience to bother them, for a random connection to materialize. In the summer of 2015, 2 years after Tiffany's disappearance, the case experienced a brief resurgence of attention when a woman in Louisiana contacted authorities claiming she had seen someone who looked exactly like Tiffany working at a roadside produce stand. The Daniels family flew to Louisiana immediately, accompanied by Detective Rodriguez. The woman they found indeed bore a striking resemblance to Tiffany, similar height, build, and coloring. But when they approached her, she spoke with a thick Cajun accent and had a lifetime of memories that clearly belonged to someone else. That was one of the hardest days, Cindy Daniels later wrote on the family's blog. To have hope surge so powerfully, only to have it crash around you again. We smiled politely, apologized for bothering her, and walked away. In the car, we just cried, all the way back to Florida. As 2016 approached, the family made the difficult decision to hire a private investigator, David Marshburn, a former detective known for his work on high-profile missing persons cases, brought fresh eyes and new resources to the investigation. Marshburn's approach was methodical. He re-examined every piece of evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and explored theories that law enforcement had previously considered and dismissed. He spent weeks walking the coastline where Tiffany's car was found, studying tidal patterns and terrain. One thing that struck me immediately, Marshburn noted in his preliminary report, is how quickly the landscape changes in that area. What was accessible 3 years ago might be completely different now. Dunes shift, vegetation grows, erosion occurred. If someone left evidence there, it could be long gone or just now becoming exposed. The private investigation also delved deeper into Tiffany's digital life than law enforcement had initially done. Marshburn hired a forensic computer expert to conduct a more thorough analysis of Tiffany's laptop and social media account. What they found was both illuminating and puzzling. Tiffany had conducted extensive research on off-grid living and sustainable communities in the months leading up to her disappearance. She had also looked up information on international travel with minimal documentation. These searches could mean anything, Marshburn explained to the Daniels family. They could indicate she was planning to leave voluntarily, or they could be the kind of research a curious artist does, exploring ideas for projects, understanding different ways of living. The fact that she left her wallet and phone suggests she wasn't planning a long trip, but we can't rule anything out. The discovery of these searches created a subtle shift in how some people viewed the case. While the family remained convinced that Tiffany would never have left voluntarily, the possibility introduced a new layer of complexity to an already baffling situation. It's strange, Sarah Jenkins reflected. When the case was fresh, everyone assumed foul play. Now, 3 years later, some people are saying maybe she just left, as if time makes the idea of her abandoning her life more plausible. But those people didn't know Tiffany. They didn't see how she was with her parent, how excited she was about upcoming projects at the theater. She wasn't going anywhere. As 2017 marked 4 years without answers, the family's approach to their loss began to evolve. The frantic energy of the early years had given way to a more sustainable form of remembrance. They established the Tiffany Daniels Memorial Art Scholarship for students at Pensacola State College, ensuring that their daughter's creative legacy would continue to inspire others. They also became advocates for other families of missing persons, working with legislators to improve policies around missing persons investigations and victim support. In transforming their personal tragedy into public service, they found a way to channel their grief into something meaningful. You never move on, Cindy Daniels said at a press conference announcing the scholarship. You move forward with the loss. You learn to carry it. You find ways to honor the person you miss by living the values they cherished. Tiffany believed in art, in beauty, in giving voice to things that couldn't speak for themselves. The scholarship is her voice continuing to speak. The 5th anniversary in 2018 brought a renewed wave of media attention. Local news stations ran special reports. The newspaper published a lengthy retrospective. The family appeared on a national true crime podcast, sharing Tiffany's story with a wider audience. With this attention came new tips, some credible, most not. A fisherman claimed to have seen a woman matching Tiffany's description on a boat heading toward Mexico the day after she disappeared. A former co-worker revealed that Tiffany had seemed troubled in the weeks before her vanishing, though she couldn't specify what was wrong. Each potential lead was investigated, each one ultimately leading nowhere. The emotional toll of these false hopes was exhausting. The family developed a protective shell around themselves, a cautious optimism that had been tempered by years of disappointment. We've learned to live with the question, Rodney Daniels said in one of his rare public statements. We don't like it. We'll never accept it. But we've learned to live with it. You have to, eventually, or it destroys you. As 2019 arrived, bringing the case into its 7th year, the investigation had settled into a pattern of periodic reviews and occasional bursts of activity when new information emerged. Detective Rodriguez, now a sergeant, still checked the case file weekly, still kept an eye out for anything that might connect to Tiffany's disappearance. These cases become part of you, she explained. You move through your career, work new cases, get promotions, but the old ones are still there. They're the ones that keep you up at night, the ones that remind you why you became a detective in the first place. For the Daniels family, time had not healed their wounds so much as it had taught them how to function around them. They had created a new normal that included Tiffany's absence as a fundamental part of their lives. The empty place at the table was no longer a shocking void, but a familiar space of remembrance. The family had also expanded their definition of finding Tiffany. While they still hoped for physical answers, for a resolution that would bring her home in some form, they had also found ways to keep her spirit alive through the scholarship, through preserving her art, through sharing her story. People ask how we can go on without knowing, Cindy wrote in a blog post marking the 7th anniversary. The answer is that we don't go on without Tiffany. We go on with her. She's in the art we see, in the creativity we encourage, in the resilience we've discovered in ourselves. We haven't lost her. We've just learned to find her in different places. But even as they had adapted to this new reality, the fundamental question remained. Where was Tiffany Daniels? And would they ever know what happened on that hot August day in 2013 when a vibrant young artist simply vanished at the edge of the sea? In the spring of 2020, as the world grappled with the global pandemic, Detective Sergeant Maria Rodriguez found herself with something precious and rare in law enforcement: time. With court cases postponed and many routine investigations on hold, she returned to the cold cases that haunted her quiet moment. At the top of her list was Tiffany Daniels. Rodriguez had always believed that technology would eventually play a crucial role in solving the case. What had been cutting-edge forensic science in 2013 had evolved significantly in 7 years. DNA analysis had become more sophisticated, digital forensics more advanced, and the ability to extract information from seemingly insignificant evidence had improved dramatically. She decided to start with the physical evidence collected from Tiffany's Forerunner, which had been carefully preserved in the evidence locker at Pensacola Police Department. The vehicle itself had long since been released to the family, but samples of sand, fibers, and other materials collected during the initial investigation remained available for re-examination. Rodriguez contacted the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's regional laboratory, speaking with Director of Forensic Services Dr. Eleanor Chun about reanalyzing the evidence using newer techniques. Every few years, we should revisit cold cases with fresh eyes and better technology, Dr. Chun told Rodriguez during their call. What was inconclusive, or not even testable in 2013 might give us answers today. Let's start with the sand samples from the vehicle. The original analysis only determined that it was consistent with the beach where the car was found. Today, we can do much more detailed compositional analysis. The sand samples were sent to the state laboratory, where scientists conducted isotopic analysis and mineralogical fingerprinting. The results, when they came back 2 weeks later, were unexpected. The sand from the driver's side floor mat has a slightly different composition than the sand from the passenger side and exterior of the vehicle, Dr. Chin explained in her report. Both are consistent with Pensacola Beach, but the driver's side sample contains trace elements more commonly found in the Perdido Key area, approximately 15 miles east of where the car was discovered. This subtle difference might have seemed insignificant, but to Rodriguez, it suggested something important. Tiffany's vehicle had been in multiple locations before being parked at Fort Pickens, or someone who had been at Perdido Key had been driving the car. Meanwhile, advances in digital forensics prompted Rodriguez to request another examination of Tiffany's electronic devices. The original analysis had been thorough for its time, but new software could recover deleted files and analyze metadata in ways that weren't possible in 2013. The digital forensics team discovered something that had been missed in the initial investigation, a partially deleted file on Tiffany's laptop containing a series of encrypted notes. The encryption method was one that Tiffany had used before for personal journal, and with the help of a password recovery program that utilized information from her other file, technicians were able to access the content. What they found was a series of entries dated in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. The notes were fragmented, stream of consciousness thoughts that revealed a young woman grappling with something she couldn't fully articulate. August 1st, 2013. The dreams are getting worse. Always water. Always a feeling of being pulled under. Woke up gasping again last night. Sarah says it's stress, but it feels different, more real. August 5th, 2013. Met with Dr. Martinez today. She says the dissociative episodes are probably related to the accident last year. Wants to increase the medication. I hate how it makes me feel, like I'm watching my life through a window, but the alternative is scarier. August 8th, 2013. Another episode at work today. 1 minute I was painting set pieces. The next I was standing in the parking lot with no memory of how I got there. Marcus said I looked out of it. If only he knew how out of it I really feel. August 10th, 2013. The research helps, knowing that people have survived with this condition for years. Found a support group online. They talk about safe places to go during episodes, places where you won't hurt yourself, places where you can just ride it out until you come back to yourself. August 11th, 2013. Made a map today. Places along the coast where I could go if it happens again. Remote but accessible. Places where the water is calm. Places where no one would find me until I'm ready to be found. These entries painted a picture of Tiffany struggling with a condition she hadn't shared with many people. The accident referenced in the August 5th entry was a car accident she had been in the previous year, resulting in a head injury that had initially seemed minor but appeared to have lingering effects. Rodriguez immediately reached out to Dr. Elena Martinez, the therapist mentioned in Tiffany's note. Due to patient confidentiality, Dr. Martinez couldn't share specifics about their session, but she did confirm that Tiffany had been experiencing symptoms consistent with dissociative episodes related to her head injury. Tiffany was concerned about how these episodes might affect her job and her relationship, Dr. Martinez told investigators. She was afraid of losing her independence if people knew the extent of her symptoms. She was very resistant to the idea of medication, though she did agree to try at low doses. This new information shifted the direction of the investigation. While foul play had been ruled out, the possibility that Tiffany had experienced a significant dissociative episode on August 12, 2013, now seemed more plausible. Rodriguez decided to revisit the search area, focusing on locations Tiffany might have identified as safe places during a dissociative state. Using the detailed topographical maps of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, she identified several remote areas that matched the description in Tiffany's notes, places accessible by vehicle but isolated enough that someone could remain undetected for days. In early June 2020, as Florida began to reopen after pandemic lockdown, Rodriguez organized a small search team to explore these areas. They focused on Perdido Key, where the sand analysis suggested Tiffany's vehicle had been before being moved to Fort Pickens. What they discovered in a remote section of Johnson Beach changed everything. Tucked behind a cluster of sea oats, partially obscured by wind-blown sand, was a small makeshift shelter constructed from driftwood and pieces of canvas that appeared to have been cut from a tent. Nearby, searchers found a canvas bag containing art supplies, paints, brushes, and sketchbooks that were positively identified as belonging to Tiffany. More significantly, they found a small plastic container with prescription medication matching the type Dr. Martinez had prescribed, with the label torn off, but the pills still identifiable. The most chilling discovery, however, was a series of small driftwood sculptures arranged in a semicircle around the shelter. Each sculpture depicted a human figure with arms outstretched, seemingly reaching towards something just beyond their grasp. Friends and family immediately recognized the style as distinctly Tiffany's. "This is her work," Sarah Jenkins confirmed when shown photographs of the sculpture. "This is exactly the kind of thing she would create. She made these little figures all the time." She called them the reachers, representations of people striving for something just beyond their grasp. The discovery of this makeshift camp suggested that Tiffany had indeed been at Johnson Beach after her disappearance, but it didn't explain what happened to her afterward. The camp appeared to have been abandoned for some time, with weather patterns suggesting it had last been used shortly after her disappearance. As the search expanded around the area, investigators made another discovery: a set of footprints leading from the camp toward the water, preserved in a section of mud that had been covered by sand and only recently exposed by erosion. The footprints appear to belong to a single person, walking steadily toward the Gulf. Forensic analysis confirmed that the footprints matched shoes similar to a pair owned by Tiffany, though the exact match couldn't be determined due to the degraded condition of the print. The possibility that Tiffany had walked into the Gulf during a dissociative episode was now being seriously considered. The question was whether she had done so voluntarily or whether someone had led her there. To explore this question, Rodriguez decided to revisit one aspect of the case that always troubled her: the location of Tiffany's vehicle. If she had experienced a dissociative episode at Johnson Beach, how did her car end up at Fort Pickens? The answer came from an unexpected source: a retired fisherman named Harold Wilson who lived near Johnson Beach. When investigators showed him a photograph of Tiffany, he remembered seeing her on multiple occasions in the summer of 2013. "I noticed her because she was always alone," Wilson told investigators. "Most people come to the beach with friends or family, but she was always by herself, just painting or walking along the water. Sometimes she seemed fine. Other times she looked confused, like she wasn't sure where she was." More significantly, Wilson remembered seeing Tiffany's for a runner park near the access road to Johnson Beach on August 12th, 2013. "I remember the date because it was my wife's birthday," Wilson explained. "I went out early to fish and saw the SUV there around 7 a.m. When I came back around 4 p.m., it was still there. There was a man looking at it. Seemed concerned. He was trying the door handles, looking inside." When shown a photo array, Wilson immediately identified the man as Thomas Caldwell, a local handyman who had done occasional work for the Daniels family. Caldwell, now 68 and living in a mobile home park in Milton, Florida, was brought in for questioning. He admitted to being at Johnson Beach on August 12, 2013, but claimed he was there fishing. "I saw the SUV and recognized it as belonging to the Daniels girl," Caldwell told investigators. "I knew her parents from when I did some work on their house. The car was unlocked, which seemed odd. I looked inside to see if everything was okay. Her purse was on the seat, her bike in the back. I thought maybe she was in the water, so I waited a bit, then walked along the beach looking for her. Didn't see her, so I figured she'd probably gotten a ride with someone and would come back for her car later." When asked why he hadn't reported seeing the abandoned vehicle, Caldwell became defensive. "It wasn't my business," he said. "People leave cars at the beach all the time. I didn't think anything of it." Rodriguez found Caldwell's explanation suspicious, but not necessarily incriminating. However, when investigators ran a background check on Caldwell, they discovered something troubling. He had a history of minor assaults and had been questioned in another missing person case in 2008, though never charged. More significantly, when forensic technicians examined Caldwell's work van, which he still owned, they found traces of sand consistent with both Johnson Beach and Fort Pickens, as well as fibers that matched those from the floor mats of Tiffany's 4Runner. Under further questioning, Caldwell's story began to unravel. He eventually admitted that he had moved Tiffany's vehicle from Johnson Beach to Fort Pickens on August 12, 2013. I was worried about it getting ticketed or towed, he claimed. I knew the Daniels family, and I didn't want them to have that hassle on top of everything else. I thought I was helping. When asked why he hadn't mentioned this in the initial investigation, Caldwell claimed he had been scared. I have a record, he said. I figured I'd be a suspect. I didn't want that kind of trouble. The discovery that Caldwell had moved Tiffany's vehicle was significant, but it still didn't explain what happened to her. The evidence increasingly pointed to a tragic accident, Tiffany experiencing a dissociative episode and walking into the Gulf, but the involvement of Caldwell complicated the narrative. As investigators dug deeper into Caldwell's background and activities, they made a shocking discovery that would change everything. Phone records showed that Caldwell had made several calls to a number in Alabama on August 12, 2013, calls that he had failed to mention during his interview. The number belonged to his estranged daughter, Rebecca Caldwell, who lived in Mobile. When investigators contacted Rebecca, she revealed something that her father had never shared with anyone. On August 12, 2013, my dad called me in a panic, Rebecca told investigators. He said he had found a young woman at Johnson Beach who seemed to be in some kind of trance or confused state. He said she was walking toward the water and wouldn't respond when he called out to her. He said he grabbed her arm to stop her, but she pulled away and fell, hitting her head on a piece of driftwood. According to Rebecca, her father believed he had caused the young woman's death and panic. He said he didn't know what to do, Rebecca continued through tears. He said he checked for a pulse and couldn't find one. He was afraid he'd be blamed for her death, so he moved her body into his van and drove away. He wouldn't tell me where he took her, just that it was somewhere no one would ever find her. This confession explains so much: the movement of Tiffany's vehicle, Caldwell's nervousness during questioning, his failure to mention moving the car. It also provided a tragic explanation for what had happened to Tiffany Daniels. When confronted with his daughter's statement, Thomas Caldwell broke down and confessed. He admitted to finding Tiffany in a dissociative state, attempting to help her, and accidentally causing her death when she fell and hit her head. I didn't mean to hurt her, Caldwell sobbed during his confession. I was just trying to stop her from walking into the water. She pulled away suddenly, lost her balance, and fell. I swear, I thought she was already dead. I panicked. I've lived with this guilt for 7 years. Caldwell led investigators to a remote wooded area in Santa Rosa County, approximately 30 miles north of Pensacola, where he had buried Tiffany's body. The remains were found exactly where he described, though they had been significantly degraded by time and environmental conditions. Dental records confirmed what the Daniels family had both feared and somehow always known. Their daughter was never coming home. Tiffany Daniels was gone. The revelation brought a complicated mix of emotions for the family. Relief at finally having answers, devastation at confirming their worst fears, and anger toward a man whose actions had denied them closure for 7 years. For investigators, the case highlighted the importance of persistence and technological advancement in solving cold cases. What had begun as a mysterious disappearance had ultimately been solved through a combination of new forensic techniques, digital evidence recovery, and the courage of a woman who couldn't live with her father's secret any longer. The arrest of Thomas Caldwell in July 2020 sent shockwaves through the Pensacola community. For 7 years, residents had followed the mystery of Tiffany Daniels' disappearance, sharing flyers, participating in searches, and wondering what happened to the vibrant young artist who had vanished so suddenly. Now, the truth emerged: not a stranger abduction or a voluntary disappearance, but a tragic accident followed by a panic cover-up. The news broke during a difficult time, with the community still reeling from the effects of the pandemic. Yet, despite the challenges of gathering during a public health crisis, people found ways to process this devastating revelation. A makeshift memorial appeared outside the Pensacola State College Theater Department. Flowers, candles, and reproductions of Tiffany's artwork arranged around a photograph of her smiling face. At a press conference announcing the arrest, Detective Sergeant Maria Rodriguez stood before a small gathering of reporters, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. While we can answer the question of what happened to Tiffany Daniels, we can never undo the pain this has caused her family and our community, Rodriguez said. This case reminds us that sometimes the truth is more complicated than we imagine, that tragedy can arise from misunderstanding and fear rather than malice. The legal proceedings against Thomas Caldwell moved quickly. Charged with manslaughter and improper disposal of human remains, the 68-year-old faced a possibility of 15 years in prison. His attorney, Mark Hastings, argued for leniency based on Caldwell's age, his lack of criminal history involving violence, and the circumstances of the incident. This was a tragedy, not a crime, Hastings told reporters outside the courthouse. My client made a terrible mistake born of panic, not malice. He has lived with this guilt for 7 years, a punishment in itself. The Daniels family, meanwhile, struggled with their own complex emotions. While they held Caldwell responsible for his actions, they also recognized the tragic nature of what had occurred. "We don't believe Mr. Caldwell intended to harm Tiffany," Cindy Daniels said in a statement read by their family spokesperson. "But his actions after her death denied us 7 years of truth and closure. He allowed us to search, to hope, to wonder, all while knowing the answers we desperately sought. That is a burden we will never understand." The trial, scheduled for November 2020, was delayed due to pandemic-related court closures. This extended waiting period was difficult for all involved, particularly for the Daniels family, who now had to live with the knowledge of what had happened to their daughter without the legal resolution that might bring some form of closure. During this time, the community continued to process the revelation. Opinions about Caldwell's culpability varied widely. Some viewed him as a monster who had compounded a tragedy with selfish action. Others saw him as a flawed human who had made a terrible mistake under pressure. This division became apparent in online forums and community discussion. On local news websites, comment sections filled with passionate arguments about appropriate punishment and moral responsibility. The case had touched something deep in the community's psyche, raising questions about human nature, the limits of forgiveness, and the meaning of justice. The trial finally began in February 2021, with limited public attendance due to ongoing pandemic restrictions. The proceedings were live-streamed, allowing community members to follow the case remotely. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Chun, painted a picture of a man whose actions, while not initially malicious, had demonstrated profound disregard for human dignity and the suffering of others. The defendant may not have intended to kill Tiffany Daniels, Chun argued in her opening statement, but when faced with the consequences of his actions, he chose self-preservation over truth. He chose to let a family suffer rather than face responsibility. He chose to hide his mistake rather than seek help. These choices, made in panic, still constitute criminal behavior. The defense focused on Caldwell's state of mind at the time of the incident, emphasizing his belief that Tiffany was already dead and his genuine fear of being blamed for her death. Thomas Caldwell is not a criminal mastermind, defense attorney Mark Hastings told the court. He is a frightened man who made the worst decision of his life at a moment of extreme stress. He has lived with this decision every day for 7 years. Isn't that punishment enough? The most emotional testimony came from Rebecca Caldwell, who described her father's call on August 12, 2013, and the burden of keeping a secret. "He was my father," she said through tears. "I was torn between doing what was right and protecting him. I told myself he was an old man, that he'd suffered enough. But as the years went on, I saw the Daniels family on the news, and I knew I was complicit in their pain. When the investigators called me, it was almost a relief to finally tell the truth." Rebecca's testimony was followed by that of forensic experts who explained the evidence linking Caldwell to the movement of Tiffany's vehicle and the disposal of her remains. The most difficult testimony for many to hear came from Dr. Elena Martinez, Tiffany's therapist, who described the dissociative episodes Tiffany had been experiencing. "These episodes can manifest as a kind of trance-like state," Dr. Martinez explained. "The person appears awake, but is disconnected from their surroundings. They may not respond to external stimuli or recognize familiar people. It's entirely possible that Tiffany wouldn't have recognized Mr. Caldwell or understood his attempts to help." This testimony helped paint a clearer picture of what might have happened on that August day. Tiffany, in a dissociative state, wandering toward the water. Caldwell, a concerned acquaintance, trying to help. The tragic accident when she pulled away and fell, and the panicked decision that followed. The Daniels family chose not to attend the trial in person. Instead, watching from home. In a victim impact statement submitted to court, Cindy and Rodney Daniels described the 7 years of uncertainty and pain. "There's a special kind of hell reserved for those who love someone who has vanished," they wrote. "It's a limbo between hope and despair, a constant state of suspended animation. Every phone call brings a surge of adrenaline. Every news report about unidentified remains brings a wave of nausea. Every holiday season is an exercise in endurance through grief. Mr. Caldwell denied us the ability to process our loss, to move through the stages of grief, to find a way to live with our sadness. He may not have intended to kill our daughter, but he certainly intended to hide what happened to her. That intention has shaped our lives for 7 years. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for 7 hours before returning with a verdict: guilty of manslaughter and improper disposal of human remains. The sentencing phase followed, with the Daniels family requesting the maximum penalty. Justice delayed is not justice denied, Cindy Daniels told the court via video link. but it is a different kind of justice, one tempered by years of unnecessary suffering. We ask that Mr. Caldwell receive a sentence that reflects not just a tragic accident, but the deliberate choices he made afterward. In March 2021, Judge Michael Harrison sentenced Thomas Caldwell to 12 years in prison, the maximum for the charges, with credit for time served in consideration of his age and health status. The sentence brought a measure of closure to some community members, while others felt it was too lenient. In the months following the trial, the Daniels family focused on creating a lasting memorial to their daughter. Working with Pensacola State College, they established the Tiffany Daniels Gallery on campus, a permanent exhibition space featuring her artwork alongside pieces by other young artists from the Gulf Coast region. Tiffany's art was her voice. Cindy Daniels said the gallery opening. Through this space, her voice will continue to speak, to inspire, to challenge and delight. Her story, tragic as it is, has reminded our community of the importance of compassion, of reaching out to those who are struggling, of never giving up on the search for truth. The gallery became a place of pilgrimage for those who had followed Tiffany's case, for art students, and for families of other missing persons who found solace in the Daniels family's journey from uncertainty to truth. The case also prompted changes in how local law enforcement handled missing persons cases. The Pensacola Police Department implemented new protocols for immediate evidence preservation in missing persons cases, recognizing that the first 48 hours were crucial even when foul play wasn't initially suspected. Detective Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, who had never given up on the case, was promoted to captain and put in charge of a new cold case unit funded by a federal grant. In interviews, she emphasized the importance of persistence in investigative work. Tiffany Daniels taught me that no case is truly cold as long as someone still cares about the answer, Rodriguez said. Technology evolves, memories fade, but the need for truth remains constant. Our job is to keep asking questions, to keep looking at evidence with fresh eyes, to never forget that behind every case file is a human story waiting to be understood. As the second anniversary of Caldwell's conviction approached, the Daniels family made a pilgrimage to Johnson Beach, where the makeshift camp had been discovered. They brought with them one of Tiffany's Reacher sculptures, which they placed near the water as a permanent memorial. "We used to come here searching, hoping to find some clue that would lead us to Tiffany," Rodney Daniels said, his arm around his wife's shoulder. "Now we come here to remember, to honor her memory, to find peace with the truth. The ocean that took her also gives us back her spirit, in the waves, in the light, in the endless horizon that so fascinated her." The community's response to the case's resolution evolved over time. The initial shock and anger gradually gave way to a more nuanced understanding of human fallibility and the complex ways that tragedy can unfold. The case became a touchstone for discussions about mental health, particularly dissociative disorders related to head injuries, and about the importance of community support for those experiencing psychological crises. In the years since the trial, several positive developments have emerged from the tragedy. A local mental health organization established the Tiffany Daniels Outreach Program, providing education about dissociative disorders and support for individuals and families affected by them. The program has helped hundreds of people recognize symptoms and seek appropriate treatment. Additionally, the case inspired the creation of a regional missing persons database that allows law enforcement agencies across state lines to share information more effectively. This system has already helped solve several other cases, demonstrating how even the most tragic stories can lead to positive change. For the Daniels family, life has found a new rhythm, one that includes both grief and purpose. They continue to oversee the art gallery and scholarship program, finding comfort in keeping Tiffany's creative spirit alive. They've also become advocates for other families of missing persons, offering guidance and support drawn from their own experience. "You never get over losing a child," Cindy Daniels said in a recent interview, "but you can learn to carry the loss with grace. You can find meaning in the pain. You can honor their memory by living the values they cherish." Tiffany believed in beauty, in truth, in connection. Those are the things we focus on now. The community, too, has found ways to remember Tiffany Daniels. Each year on August 12th, people gather at the beach for a sunset ceremony, placing luminaries in the sand and sharing stories of how her case touched their lives. The event has grown from a small gathering of family and friends to a community-wide reflection on loss, resilience, and the enduring power of hope. Thomas Caldwell, now 71, remains incarcerated in a Florida state prison. He has been granted parole eligibility but has expressed little interest in seeking early release, telling a prison chaplain that he deserves to serve his full sentence as penance for his action. In a letter to the Daniels family, written through his attorney, Caldwell expressed remorse for the pain he caused. "I can never undo the damage I've done," he wrote. "I can only live each day with the knowledge of my failure to do the right thing. Your daughter was a beautiful soul whose light was extinguished too soon. I will carry the weight of that knowledge for the rest of my days. The Daniels family has not responded to the letter, preferring to focus their energy on positive memorialization rather than engagement with the man who caused their pain. As Pensacola continues to evolve and grow, the story of Tiffany Daniels remains part of its collective memory, a cautionary tale about human fragility, a reminder of the importance of compassion, and a testament to the enduring power of truth. Her artwork continues to inspire new generations of artists. Her story continues to inform investigative practices, and her memory continues to touch those who never knew her but have come to understand her through the legacy she left behind. In the gallery that bears her name, among the vibrant canvases and bold sculptures, there hangs a small plaque with a quote from one of Tiffany's journal entries. Art is the way we make sense of the world when words fail us. It's the bridge between what we feel and what we can say. It's truth in its purest form. This philosophy, which guided Tiffany's life and work, has become the guiding principle of how her community remembers her, not as a victim or a tragedy, but as a creative spirit whose light continues to shine through the beauty she created and the positive change that emerged from the darkness of her disappearance. The edge of the sea where Tiffany's earthly journey ended has become a place of pilgrimage and reflection, where the endless rhythm of waves serves as a reminder of life's persistence and nature's capacity for renewal. Those who visit speak of feeling her presence there, not as a ghost or a memory, but as something more elemental, like the salt in the air or the light dancing on the water. In the end, the story of Tiffany Daniels is about many things: a tragic accident, a panic cover-up, years of uncertainty, and eventual truth. But it's also about resilience, of a family that refused to give up, of a community that refused to forget, and of the human spirit's capacity to find meaning even in the most devastating circumstances. Justice may come late, but it never vanishes.